Hello, my channel's going to take a different direction now. I'm going to do a monthly YouTube video on my favourite musicals. I've been collecting musicals on vinyl now for well over 30 years, and I thought I'd give you some story behind them, just to make things fun. This year, on the 15th of March 2026, is the exact date 70 years from the premiere that My Fair Lady came into, had its Broadway debut. It did, of course, star Rex Harrison and Julie Andrews. And this one is signed by Rex to the fairest gal of them all. Who knows who that could be? Maybe that could be Julie. We don't know. But how did we get here? How did we get to My Fair Lady? Well, the story is based on a show called Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw, an Irish playwright. It premiered in 1913 and was made into a film in the late 30s, starring Trevor Howard and Wendy Hillier. Alan J. Lerner decided to try and get the rights for this, which was sitting with George Bernard Shaw and a guy called Gabriel Pascal, who oversaw his estate. George Bernard Shaw was very, very reluctant at the time because he'd had a not a very good experience on his part from a show called A Chocolate Soldier, which was one of his and was turned into like a Viennetta style thing. The actual original one was called The Arms and the Man, and it was turned into The Chocolate Soldier. So he was very reluctant to give rights to anybody. When George Bernard Shaw passed away around 1950, Alan J. Lerner approached Gabriel Pascal for the rights. Gabriel talked it out with the estate, with George Bernard Shaw's estate, and they agreed. They took Pygmalion back. He showed it to his partner, his writing partner, Fritz Lowe, and they set about and decided it couldn't be turned into a musical because it misses key elements, like it doesn't have a love story, it doesn't have a backstory, it doesn't have any chorus work in it. So how were they going to do it? They were looking at totally reinventing it, putting Higgins as a master of a boys' school learning English properly. That didn't work, and in fact Rodgers and Hammerstein had looked at it and said that they couldn't make it work either, and it wouldn't work as a musical. It was put on the back burner and left a little bit, and Alan J. Lerner went to look at writing lyrics for Little Abner. Frederick Lowe did his little bits, and one day Alan J. Lerner had learned that Gabriel Pascal had died, and so the rights would be available. But what he didn't realise is that MGM was also in the running for the rights. Well, going up against someone like that, they decided that the best thing to do was to write it as much as they can so it's nearly finished, so they couldn't be turned down. But they looked at it and they thought, well, what are we going to do with this play that you can't turn into a musical, we've been told? So what they did is they virtually looked at the film of Pygmalion and decided, okay, we'll do an exact copy of Pygmalion, we'll put songs to it, and we'll elaborate on scenes that were off stage, in the book, things like the Embassy Ball and things like that. And that's what they did. So they started writing. This was about 1953 time, started writing. Then it came to the point of casting. Now, for Eliza had been played in the film by Wendy Hillier, who was in her 40s at the time, and they looked at Mary Martin, who was a great Broadway star. She'd been on as Maria in The Sound of Music. She played Nellie Forbush in the South Pacific. Dolly, she played in Hello Dolly, the touring version. So she was well averse to what she was doing, but she herself was in her 40s. Alan J. Lerner invited her and her husband Richard Halliday around to listen to the songs he'd got. He'd got 3 or 4 songs, and she turned to him at the end and said, "But Alan, you seem to have lost your talent." That was the end of Mary Martin. So when they were trying to think who can play Eliza, because Eliza in the book is around 19, 20 years old. She's quite a young girl. Angela remembered a show that him and Fritz had seen, a English import called The Boyfriend, and how the leading lady there had totally blew them away. A girl called Julie Andrews, who they approached and loved her audition. Now for Higgins, rumours are that it was first given to Noel Coward, who not only turned it down but said Rex Harrison's the only person who can play that. Of course, Rex Harrison was a brilliant actor, but a singer he wasn't, and he hated the actual fact of singing live in front of an orchestra. And in fact, when you see the film, it's the first time, I'm not saying it's the only time, but it's the first time that an actor in a musical has sang directly onto the soundtrack from the film. Normally you go in a studio, you record the soundtrack and it's added later. He sang it live because he was scared to death of going into the booth to sing it. Consequently, all his songs were written in speech talk sort of thing, so he could sing them or speak them and they would make perfect sense either way he did it. He said he'd only do it, Rex Harrison did, if not a lot was changed in the lib from Pygmalion. So Alan J. Lerner convinced him he changed it maybe 7 lines. But in rehearsals, if Rex heard the line he wasn't certain of, he'd shout, "Where's my penguin?" which was a penguin edition of Pygmalion. And when he finally left the role of Higgins, the whole cast clubbed together and bought him a giant cuddly penguin because of the joke, "Where's my penguin?" The cast was completed with Stanley Holloway as Alfred P. Doolittle, and Robert Coote became Pickering. It premiered in 1956, that's 70 years to the day, and it ran for over 2,770 performances, which at the time was the longest running show on Broadway. In 1959, it transferred to the West End, which is that one. That's My Fair Lady. That's in stereo. Recorded in London, February the 1st, 1959. Let's just turn it over, and there we have the front of it, which tells us the cast virtually, in fact, was transferred intact. Same people: Rex Harrison, Julie Andrews, Stanley Holloway, Robert Coote. Where again it ran and it ran and it ran. Sorry about this. And there's the back of that, and there's Eliza and Higgins. Because of its success, oh, by the way, the rights to it they did win because they'd three quarters of written it, and when the company heard, the bank heard how far they got, they gave the rights to Alan J. Lerner and Frederick Lowe, because they had actually started writing the show without the rights, which was quite a risky thing to do. As we come on to the film version of My Fair Lady, when they were picking Eliza, they decided Julie Andrews wasn't box office enough, wasn't well known enough, that strangely stuck with Stanley Holloway, who to me was typically Northern British. But they decided they were going to go with Audrey Hepburn. And here it is. Audrey Hepburn, Rex Harrison, My Fair Lady. Of course, Stanley Holloway reprised his role. Wilfrid Hyde-White took the Robert Coote role of Pickering. And it was a big success. The problem was they weren't happy with Audrey Hepburn's vocals, and there are examples of Audrey Hepburn singing, and she does a very, very good job. And they did tell her they were going to keep the vocals until the last minute, and they got Marni Nixon, who was a famous session singer who'd also done Maria. She dubbed for Natalie Wood in West Side Story, and also Deborah Kerr in The King and I. She had a very small Blink and You Missed It part as one of the nuns as well in The Sound of Music. But yeah, Marni Nixon, actually, it's her that you hear on the soundtrack of My Fair Lady. As we spoke before, Rex Harrison sang directly onto the soundtrack, so he wouldn't have to go into a studio. And My Fair Lady was born, and it was with us. Just a little note on this copy. Look, there's a few stills there from the actual show. The actual film. Let's just take us up to there. And there's My Fair Lady. There you go. And Rex Harrison, of course, played the role a few times on the West End, going back to his role in the 80s. Now, this version is 20 years later. This is the 20th anniversary, with Ian Richardson, Christine Andreas, George Rose, and again, Robert Coote as Pickering. Quite a faster paced. If you play it on vinyl, it's quite a faster paced than the others are, but still a great addition to anyone's collection. Now, the film won several Oscars. Audrey Hepburn won the very controversial Best Actress award for a musical, which didn't worry Julie Andrews too much, because she was nominated for the Best Actress. Julie won it for, I do believe it was Mary Poppins. Yeah, that's the one. Audrey was nominated, Julie won it. So even though Julie didn't get to be in the film, which to me is a travesty, nothing against Audrey, she's great in it, but it would have saved them so much money not having to dub vocals. And we'd have got to see what the Broadway production was actually like. She got her revenge, if you like, by winning the Oscar for Best Female in Musical. Little correction there, I got that bit wrong on my notes. I do apologise. Anyway, that's my first one on some of my collection on famous musicals that were released predominantly in vinyl. I'm hoping to do one a month. If I get enough likes and shares, which you're very welcome to do, I will do one every fortnight, and we'll pick a different show, and we'll do a little bit on each one. You can suggest the shows if you like, but I'm looking at things around the classic eras, around the 50s to the 80s, things like Fiddler on the Roof and all the things that we know. And I'll also do some obscure ones of things that by famous people who you think, oh, I've not heard of that one before. There are quite a lot of that around. But anyway, thank you for sitting and listening. I hope you're all well, and like and share if you want to see another one. Thank you very much. Bye.